Welcome to my podcast, The Laura Dowling Experience. Many of you will know me from my Instagram page, @fabuwellness, where I love to shine a light on topics that people normally shy away from. Today I spoke to Tara Rafter, a life coach. Tara is one of the most beautiful and inspiring humans I have ever met. Today we spoke about love, life, grief, worthiness, and finding your inner compass. To support the Laura Dowling Experience, please check out our sponsors in the podcast notes below. Enjoy the show. So Tara, you have your tea?
I have. Armed and dangerous.
I knew that when I got you on, I'd have to have tea at the ready, because I know that it's one of your addictions is your tea.
I love a cup of tea. I know. I feel like it's just the solver
the
of
granny
the
in
world's,
you.
I don't know what. It's me mother in me.
I'm going to put these
the
on.
solver of the world's problems. Oh, you look like Brittany now. Fantastic. Love it.
I do, don't I?
Yeah. Brittany's doing great now. I'm glad to see her coming on a bit.
No, it's great to
get
see
so
her.
invested in these people, don't we?
I know, but like, God love her. Like the stuff that she went through as it's so
Through the
young.
wars. I know. I feel like
No
we
more
know
than
them.
yourself,
Ah,
which
sure
is
look.
why I have you on. So I met you a couple of years ago, but you helped me through a massive wobble that I had before I launched my own business. And I just wanted to bring you here to tell your story, because it's an amazing story.
Thanks.
And to tell people how you were always brilliant, obviously, but how you got to be the amazing, fabulous person that you are today. So will we start from the start? Will we start from the beginning or the end? Or
beginning?
do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what you do now and then how you got into it all?
Yeah. So I am a life coach and a neurolinguistic programming practitioner.
Goodness, that's a mouthful.
I can't even say it either, and I do it to Google how to spell it. But I am blessed enough to work with people across like 5 continents now. COVID definitely did that for me. It's mental. It just opened up the world, and Zoom became our best friend. But people tend to come to me if they feel like they're kind of stuck or lost or at some sort of a crossroads, or there's some sort of a discontentment or a dis-ease in themselves around so many different aspects of life. It can be anything, literally, that will sit in the chair. All I ever get is an email address, a phone number and a name. So I never really know what you're going to come to me with. And from a coaching perspective, the work that we do is very present future focused. So, we look at what's happening in your life now and we look at where you want to be. So kind of current state to desired state, if you like. And the time is most spent in the session on where the obstacles are. So what are the things that are in the way that are stopping you from moving to where you want to be? And that part of the work is the fascination, because it has opened up a whole world of things for me, around human behavior and potential and, what people are capable of and the stories that we tell ourselves. And that work with a client is really, really magical, because, I've said this before, but it's a really big privilege to sit with someone and have them be essentially vulnerable with you and just drop all the guards and take off all the masks that we wear in the world, and just allow themselves to be seen, really be seen. For some people, for the very first time. And we talk about the issues that maybe they feel are standing in their way, or I would make observations in the session around what I think is standing in the way. And then we build an action plan to move them forward. I always make the distinction, in the work between what I do and what a counsellor and psychotherapist does. So they would, vastly have their foundations in the past when it comes to the work. And so many of my clients go to counsellors and psychotherapists alongside their sessions with me, and both, aspects of the work in essence would complement each other. So it's fabulous. I get to work with the coolest people every day of the week, and I get to watch people move from where they are to where they want to be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you helped me. And like you said, you're so vulnerable coming to someone like you.
Yeah.
And you do open up more than you ever would, I think.
Yeah.
But maybe it's just your way. And how did you get into coaching in the first place? How did you become the person you are?
It's such a long story.
But that's great. We've loads of time.
And we loads of tea, so it's all good. I've told this story a few times, and the more I tell it, it's funny, the more I remember. and the more stands out to me as, we are so much more than what we are trained in. When I look back at my life, like I landed in on the 1st of May 1981, and I have the same birthday as my dad, and I have one brother that's 6 years older than me. So we were a little family of 4, and my first memories of being in the world, it's funny, like the things that stick out in your head. I remember being at my granddad's funeral, and I have this distinct memory of looking down at my shoes. I had a fabulous little pair of black patent shoes on. I think I was 2.
Oh,
I know. I was obviously thrilled with the shoes and had no idea of what was going on. But I remember I could see the railings, and I remember asking Ma'am what this was. And I said, this is what I see in my head. And she said, that was actually the church. So I could remember seeing railings, and I could remember people crying. And I remember being so tuned into the fact that the grown-ups were sad. And I remember being amazed and watching their faces, and I can still see the people cuddling the other people. And like when I talked to Ma'am about it, I was 2. It's incredible the things that will stick in your head.
So do you think you were in tune with people even from the age of 2?
I was. And, it's amazing to look back at that little me, like, and kind of spend time with her. One of the things that I feel like has been a fundamental part of the journey. Sadly, Dad was an alcoholic, and domestic violence was, something that was a regular occurrence in the house. And as a result of that...
As in daily occurrence, or...?
Christmas time was always a nightmare. I know people used to really look forward to Christmas, and obviously it has changed in later years, obviously, in my life, but the binges would last sometimes 6 or 8 weeks at a time. There was no timeline on when it was going to happen. And then he'd go off the drink, and he'd know that things were not good, and, that he had made a mess of loads of things, and he could go off the drink for 6 months. And he was the most amazing man when he wasn't drinking. I see so much of myself in him. He was just kind. He used to send me a Valentine's card every year and write it from guess who. I'd be like, Dad, that is so you're writing. And we used to go, there was a field behind our house actually, and we used to go out in the mornings, and the grass was higher than me, and he used to give me a little stick, and he'd have a stick, and we used to look for mushrooms. Now,
there you go.
The Fabu. So we used to go out and listen to the birds, and he'd be telling me stories about when they were small, and they used to have to walk to school in their feet, and he was the most magical man. He was so connected to nature, and he loved whistling and singing, and he loved laughing and westerns, and he was just so full of love. But he had so many issues that he had carried forward in his own, from his own past and in his own mind. And I have such an awareness of it now through all the therapy that I've been through, and the training. He found emotion very difficult.
Okay.
For him to be very vulnerable, it sometimes he would have had to have a pint, like, and I know that was something that was definitely in him, where he struggled to have the words to say things. And if he was angry, or if he was sad, or if he felt threatened, or if he felt vulnerable, I think he thought the answer was going to be in the bottom of a bottle, or the bottom of a pint glass. And it just brought out this side to him that, was very frightening. Mum used to describe it as Jekyll and Hyde. And I definitely feel like little me, I've said this before, I learned to read a room very quickly. I learned to watch the way someone was breathing. I learned to listen to their tone of voice. I could see someone's face changing. I could feel energetically if something wasn't right with a person. And I know now it was my brain fine-tuning those skills because they meant survival or not. And that has definitely fed into the work.
Okay. And did you remember this from just that age of 2, that little girl from 2?
When I was 3, I remember the very first bad episode at home. And I remember going to a counselling session, and the brain is an incredible piece of machinery. Like, I was able to describe to the counsellor the weather outside the window, the smell of the dinner that was cooking on the range, the colour of the wallpaper, what I was wearing, the lino on the kitchen floor. Like, I had an absolute imprint in my mind of the very first, very scary situation that I remember at home. Yeah.
And was it scary? So you've a brother as well, and obviously your mummy. And did he take his violence out on only your mother, or was it the two of you as well?
All of us, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was there any hospital visits there? Like, was it picked up by the social services?
There was hospital visits, yeah. No, I think our GP had an awareness of it actually, but no, it never went any further than that. Mam was always very proud, you know, and she would have kind of kept the head up and kept the show on the road, and she loved him. You know, she loved him, and she, like, Mam left school when she was 14. And I often say she was one of the wisest people I ever met. I think in her own way, she had an awareness that it was some sort of a coping mechanism that he had. It wasn't the right one, obviously. But yeah, I think the love transcended everything else.
And as a little girl growing up in that environment, looking back on that, and like, do you have any bitterness towards the fact that you were, in actual fact, like you had to live through that because your mum didn't leave, or did your mum have a choice to leave, or did you have to work through those? I
did. I used to have an awful lot of bitterness and an awful lot of anger, you know, of why was my life like this? And I used to look at my friends and the way that what I thought, we all thought the grass was greener in everybody else's house. We all thought everyone else was the Waltons and we were the Addams family. Yeah. But I used to look at other people and think, oh my God, they have it all solved. But I remember feeling angry and sad, you know, always behind anger, so close to it is pain. That you just wanted the situation to be different, and why was it so hard? And I remember financially, just as a result of the circumstances, you know, we would have struggled. Like, and I remember Mam had cups up in the top of the press. It's definitely the way I've learned to manage money now, or my blueprint on money. And she used to measure out into the cups, you know, the coal money and the rent money for the house and the milk money. We used to have a woman that would call Maura with the milk. I remember that. And I remember seeing Mam measuring out all the money into the cups in the top of the press. So financially, it definitely put a big strain on us. You know, Mam sometimes had 4 jobs, 5 jobs for different companies, merchandising and Duns, just to keep everything going. And that part of it used to really hurt me because, you know, she'd have to go out to work and I'd see her in the evening. I remember seeing her, you know, she'd fall asleep on the chair and she'd tell you she was resting her eyes. She was wrecked, like physical work, you know, packing chickens and turkeys and all of that kind of stuff. And Christmas would be bananas, obviously, in the retail world. So I remember feeling kind of hard done by, not like poor me stuff, but just a bit, oh God, like, you know. Yeah. But I did a lot of work on that with the counsellor over the years, and I gained that kind of other perspective, you know, that the lens that we see people through changes during the chapters of our lives. And I definitely, through age and awareness and knowledge and understanding, I began to see Dad in a different light, and I began to see Mam in a different light as well. Like, she was the strongest person I have ever met, ever.
And I suppose someone that leaves school at the age of 14, she probably didn't have an awful lot of confidence either in herself.
No.
So, you know, did she meet your dad young?
And she did. Dad was the first person she ever kissed. Oh. I know. I think that's so cute. They were behind some hospital or something. I was like, Mam, too much information. Do you want to know? And yeah, he seen her. She was standing with her back to him. My mother was gorgeous. All my aunties and uncles are like such fabulous people. But Mam was gorgeous. And she had the finest pair of legs.
Did she?
Yeah.
Like a good pair of legs.
And she was standing backwards. And Dad said he always remembered seeing her fine pair of legs. And he said then she turned around and sure he was in love. And I think they were only 14.
Okay.
And then they had their first kiss. And Dad was a boxer and he was working for a tyre company them times. And he had to go off working in different places, and Mam was from Castlebar and he was from Ballina, and they kind of went their separate ways. But they used to meet every now and again at a dance. She used to tell me about these dances that were on in different places. Yeah. Like the lads one side and the girls the other. And she said she'd always end up with Dad at the end of the night. And they parted ways for a while and she was seeing someone else. And she was so mad about him. And that relationship ended. And whatever happened, she ended up meeting Dad again. And he asked her for a date on a Tuesday, and he asked her to marry him on the Friday.
Okay.
That was it. He said he was never letting her go again. Isn't that lovely? It's
That
like
is.
The Notebook.
That it is
I'm
actually,
shy-eyed
isn't it?
romantic, yeah.
Goodness me. And then growing up then, obviously, as a little girl, you remember those scary situations, and you were saying about Christmas time was always the worst. And actually I had another lady on here who said she dreads Christmas because it always brings up those kind of those thoughts and those memories of the not very nice time that Christmas is. And actually there's a huge amount of people that don't enjoy Christmas.
I know, and there's this whole expectation then that you're meant to be full of joy. Happy Christmas. I'm like, just have a Christmas.
Exactly. Like, and I think working in the retail world for 20 years as well makes me see it for what it is, which is it's very commercialized and, it's all about money spending. And then when people are forced together, in a family unit and there isn't much else going on, it can be very tricky, can't it?
God, yeah. And the pressure of the happy Christmas, you nearly feel like you're not achieving or you've done it wrong if you come out of it and you're wrecked or you're not full of the joys.
Or you're a little bit depressed.
I know.
Yeah, no, I know. And I get that from people as well.
I know.
The January blues are very real. And
of course they are.
It can be not just because it's January and it's cold and miserable. It's also because people feel, I didn't have a good Christmas. It was, it was awful. And now,
or they've been performing for the vast amount of December, thinking I should be fantastic, say yes to everything, put on all the best clothes, wear all the best everything, and then you have to be full of the joys with everyone you meet. Sure, geez, you'd be wrecked come January. No wonder there's such a thing as the January blues.
Absolutely.
I know.
And then as a little girl growing up, did you keep all of this to yourself? Did you know that it was something that should be kept a secret? Was it ever mentioned, or did you confide in anyone else ever?
No.
Like any friends or?
No, I didn't. I knew somewhere in myself that it wasn't right what was going on. And I always remember, Mum would say to us in the mornings going out now, put on your smile now and out into the world, best foot forward and, keep the best side out, and all of these little sentences that I realised became my belief systems on the world as I grew older. First we make our beliefs and then our beliefs make us. So my belief there was no matter what's happening in the background, you keep the best side out and you keep the peace. And, all of these sentences, the brain learns by repetition. So I would have heard these sentences over and over again. And it kept me very guarded from the world. And even now, my core group of friends, they're the same group of friends I have since one of them I was in nappies with. Like, I find it hard to let people in. It takes me a while to trust somebody. It's amazing what it does to you on the inside. And definitely that younger me, I was quiet and shy and I would never have dreamed of saying about what was going on.
Yeah.
Never. For fear of rejection, which is all humans' greatest fear.
I know. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then as a teenager then and kind of going through school and dealing with it. And obviously then you're getting older, you're much more aware that it's wrong, I suppose. Yeah. Or are you? Is it just because it's normal that it is normal then? Or
you still know that it's wrong, but I think it starts to impact you on different levels. Even when it comes to what your expectations are of a relationship. So, when we're small, that's all we have to look at is evidence from the world of what something is. Mm-hmm. So when you are in a situation like that, when you're small, you start to look at the people that are around you and you start to think, this is what I'm seeing, therefore this is what a marriage looks like. So I start to build my expectations of a marriage. I begin to build my expectations of what a husband is and what a wife is and what, we start to build all those stories inside our heads based off of what we look at when we're small. And that can be your absolute, maker or breaker when you move forward in life. And I think when I began to kind of get into the teenage years, I had a very strong awareness of what I didn't want. I could see the stuff that was going on at home. And they say sometimes a lot of the time our values come from scarcity. That we hold the things that are important to us now because we didn't have them when we were little. And I would have had an awareness at those ages of what I didn't want moving forward. And I definitely think that played a part in my teenage years around, boyfriends and stuff like that. I would have been lucky, thanks be to God. I always met really nice lads, but I think that was my criteria in the background, that they were quiet, sound lads and you could talk to them and they were open and honest and down to earth and, they came from good backgrounds and I'd always watch.
What's a good background?
What is a good background? Yeah. Someone that I think is able to communicate, like someone where you see honest, open conversation in a family, and that they're able to cope with things when it's really good, and they're able to cope with things when they're not good.
Yeah.
And where there's love and it's unconditional. I think that's the kind of things I would have looked out for when I was...
Do people that grow up in families where there is abuse, do some people then replicate that in their own, like you hear about people repeating that cycle, even though you said you were aware of what you didn't want. And I'm sure that anyone growing up in a family, in a situation like that doesn't necessarily want that, but you do hear about them repeating that, like women that were, when they were little girls growing up in situations like you did, going on to choose partners that don't treat them well.
I'd say it does happen. And I'd say a lot of it is through a lack of awareness maybe of, you know, what they feel they deserve. I think so much of it comes back in life to that feeling of feeling like you're enough. And I think that's one thing, you know, I found with every client that I've worked with, that undercurrent of the not enoughness. It's in everyone. I don't think I've met one person that I've worked with, and I've been blessed to work with thousands of people, where it wasn't there. And I think one of the fundamentals in humanity at the moment is that feeling of worthiness, or that feeling that you're valuable and significant and important and that you belong. And I think when those characteristics are installed in you at some stage in your life, it has a huge bearing on what path you're going to take moving forward.
And did your mum install that in you then?
Yeah, she did. Yeah. She'd always say little sentences to us like, you know, what would I do without you? You're a great bit of stuff, you know. But it gave you that sense of, I matter.
Yes.
You know, which we all look for.
Yeah,
that's
we
how
do. We all look for that.
Social media is flat out now. People looking for likes. It's like just thrives on the not enoughness of the humans, because...
Doesn't it, actually, when you think about it like that, the not enoughness. Yeah.
Once we get the click and you see the validation, it's like, oh, we get the little dopamine hitting the brain, and for a little while, all the problems go away and then they all come back.
And it means nothing really, sure it doesn't.
Not a thing.
It's about the relationships, the real tangible relationships in your life, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how did, because I know that your mum eventually left your dad, and how did that come about?
I remember I was 18. It's funny, like I definitely think she waited in it for as long as she did because we were small. But I was about to do my leaving cert, and I think I kind of had some sort of an awareness in my own head that life was about to change, you know, for me and Mam. And like my brother, as I said, was 6 years older, so he had moved on in the world. And he was doing his own thing and he was flying, he's class. But I think some part of me knew that the leaving cert was important. It's funny, like I remember, and I had no concept of like vision boards and manifestations, and this kind of crack that's everywhere now. But I remember being about 11 and sitting on my bed at home. And I remember knowing that the situation that I was in was so far away from what was right, air quotes, and that I wanted to make a better life for myself in some capacity. And I remember saying at that young age, like if I was ever lucky enough to be someone's mother, that I would want them to have a better life than the life that I was having, and not just this feeling of existing or just trying to survive what I was going through. And I remember saying to myself, I wanted one of those scrolls. You know, I'd seen them on the telly. I hadn't a clue what they were. But I remember thinking, if I get one of them scrolls where the people throw their hats up in the air, things always seem to end well after them. And if I could wear a suit to work, I felt like the people that wore suits to work were doing all right for themselves.
Okay.
I didn't know what they were doing.
It's funny what you perceive to be,
at 11.
You know, isn't it?
Oh yeah, happiness. I thought if I could buy my own house, because, you know, with money, like I said, was always something that was an issue when we were little. If I could buy my own house, if I could drive a BMW, I don't know where I got that notion.
And are you on your way to your BMW?
Well, come here, I got one and it broke my heart.
Did you?
And I got rid of it. And I wanted a little white dog. I must have seen it in a film.
Yeah.
So little 11-year-old me was like, right, if I could sort out them few things, I figured, I used to ask myself, what would it feel like to be there? And it's nuts, right? Because I've done so much training and study now. Sure, I was manifesting the bejesus out of it, but I didn't know what I was doing. And I had my little list in my head.
Isn't that crazy how...
I know.
But So we're going to go through, you know, your work that you did before, the work that you do now and everything. But isn't it crazy how you were born to do this job? Isn't it? Like, you're doing a job that you were actually doing untrained at the age of 11.
I know. Mental. I believe in that stuff though.
Oh yeah. No, without a doubt. I think I think you've got a path and a kind of a, you know, and it's whether you follow your path or not, isn't it? Because some people don't.
Completely.
They're stunted and they don't follow their path. And they may think that it sounds better to do a medical degree than to do an arts degree where, you know, and in actual fact, they could have flourished doing arts or something like that. And they're miserable being doctors.
The whole noise of the world gets in and you think, oh my God, if I was that, I'd be fantastic. But you're not following your heart's desire.
Yes. So I think it is about following your heart's desire.
Did you follow yours?
I did. I certainly am now.
I know. She can see it in you.
Did. Yeah. I did follow it, and I've been very lucky. And I know that I have said to some people when I've heard you speak, because I've heard you speak a number of times, and I've said, because you talk about trauma, and I've said to people, Jesus, like, I mean, there's people crying in the room here with Tara, and I want to cry, but I've had no trauma. I feel like I want to have had trauma in my life so I can cry along with them, because you make people cry with your speeches.
Oh, it's horrific. I know. I should come with a warning.
You should come with a warning, and you should come with handkerchiefs, because literally you have the whole room in bits.
But sure, come here. The only reason they're crying is because it resonates.
I know.
They've probably walked a mile in my shoes alongside me.
Well, that's the thing. And you start your talks off with speaking about your domestic violence being in your life from a young age. And I think that stops people in their tracks, because there's a shame around that, that you literally just, in your first sentence, eradicate, because you're like, yes, this was my life, but this isn't me.
No,
this is the way I am. And so many people in the room are from backgrounds like that, or may have had, or know of people. Yeah. And I just think it just totally, you know, it stops them and it makes them think. But you often talk about that little girl. Like you say, do you remember the little girl? Do you remember the 5-year-old?
Bring her
do you remember
up in
the
your
15-year-old?
Yeah.
Bring her up in your mind. So that 18-year-old that you were talking about, doing your leaving cert.
Yeah. She was holding tight onto that little manifestation that I had made. And she was looking ahead at what the world, and she was so afraid. Like, you know, and I often say that when I talk, go back and visit those versions of yourself. Like that little 2-year-old me, that little 3-year-old me, 7-year-old me, you know, 12-year-old me. We have these pivotal ages that when I work with people seem to come up so often, where there are huge installations that happen in terms of data in the mind. And for your brain, you know, to a large degree, we're blank canvases. You know, we come into the world with our nature. Some little humans are real feisty and some of them are quiet. And then if you can imagine yourself like an onion, the layers of nurture are wrapped around it. And all of that conditioning happens as a result of the situation that you're born into. And having an awareness of that and going back to visit those little parts of you where the layers were added on, there's so much healing that happens when you go back and visit those pieces of you. Because for me, those parts of me were so afraid and they were so unsure of, is everything going to be okay? Like, will I be all right? How is this going to pan out? You know, and when this me, 41-year-old me, goes back and hangs out with those psychological states of being, the amount of healing that happens on the inside for those parts, to see the life that I have created, you know. And look, I'm not a millionaire by any means, but I have a husband who loves me and he's the coolest man. And I have a little boy who I can't believe chose me. And we have this lovely house that has fridges and tellies and all of these things that little me is like astounded by. You know, I drive a car that you can press buttons in and the radio comes on. Like, you know, 12 or 14-year-old me is like, yes, please, we have arrived. Like all of those pieces of evidence in the now really help to reassure those frightened parts of you in the past. And that teenage version of me, you know, she was so afraid that she was going to find somebody who loved her and find friends that just accepted her for all her daftness and all the things that she loved and all the things she didn't love. And when I can show that me, that look at all the contacts in my phone book, look at all the people on Instagram, look at the crack I have with my girls when we go on a night out. And I went one of the girls there to Garth Brooks. Well, Jesus, I laughed from the minute I met her till the minute we said goodbye. Like reassuring those little vulnerable parts of you that it all works out. There is something so fulfilling and satisfying about doing that. And so much for that of that for me has been the work. And the 18-year-old that we're talking about now, like, she was a great bit of stuff. And
was she?
She was. And we don't go back enough.
We don't. Sure we don't.
No.
And you know the way, like, we look at ourselves, they say that if a woman looks at herself, like a photograph of herself 10 years ago, she goes, oh God, if only I realised how gorgeous I was 10 years ago. And if 10 years previous to that, she'd looked back in a photograph of herself, she was, if only I realised how gorgeous I was. Yeah. And it's not just about gorgeousness, because we do tend to talk about women and little girls in prettiness and pretty clothes. And so I always make a point when I meet a little girl of saying, you look so clever. What book are you reading today?
I love that.
Because I think it's so...
I have the goosebumps. I know.
Because, and I'm a mother of 3 boys, and I know that people treat girls and boys differently, and women are it's so much about their looks. It's so much about that part of them, when little girls should be shown that it's their intelligence and it's their brains and it's their little personalities that are so much more important than what's on the outside. Isn't that right?
Completely. And I think that bit that I said to you about earlier when we were chatting about the self-worth and the self-value piece, if we are only measuring what we are worth in this world based off our physical appearance, like, hello, we are missing the boat completely. I know. There is so much more to us than that. Sadly, the world that we live in is, predominantly just, I think, obsessed with what people look like. But
a certain type of person.
Yeah.
And we're also different.
And sure, there's so much more to us.
Yeah.
The essence of somebody really is when you get chatting to them, and oftentimes you'll have the best chats with people when you've the hair in a knot at the top of your head in your pajamas with 2 glasses of wine in and you're best friends for life.
I think that's the way I went on our talk.
Oh my God.
Our Zoom, do you remember?
Yeah.
I had my knickers in my hair. That's what I do as a bobbin. Always clean pair of knickers in the hair.
Stunning. But that's what people bond through.
Yeah.
If you look at the world, whenever we landed into it, we landed in tribes, and we bonded chatting around fires, talking about how we felt and what the day was like. And there was no emphasis on what we looked like. I don't think they were comparing who had the best animal skin or who had the coolest bone in their hair. I don't know what was going on. But they were just tuned into nature and tuned into the fact that we are part of nature and tuned into themselves and what was happening for themselves. And they were so present and they were so not, bothered about what was happening in the outside world. And I think that's so huge today. I think it's part of the problem. I think for so many people, if you can imagine it like a light, like we shine our light outside on the world, what everybody else is doing and what everybody else is saying and what everyone else is thinking and what everyone else is achieving and what everybody else looks like. I think if we could just spend a little bit of time shining the light inward, the world would be a much more content place. We're all bamboozled by the noise at the moment.
There's too much of it, isn't there? Yeah. And if you have that introspectiveness, it's so much better. Like looking back on that little 18-year-old and, bringing her to the fore and showing her how well she's done.
It's life-changing.
Yeah.
It's life-changing. After that, I remember, like when I did my Leaving Cert, Mum and Dad actually separated at that stage. And I remember was
that okay? Separation? How did that work out?
It was very messy. And I knew that it would be, and Mum knew that it would be. And I remember finding, there was a broadsheet paper in the town that I'm from called the Western People. Ballina is the town actually. Class spot, definitely visit it. It's a fabulous little town. And I remember opening the 2 pages. It was a big broadsheet at the time. It's got smaller now. And I remember opening it out onto the mat in the sitting room in front of the fire. And things were really bad in the house. And I like I said to you, I had the awareness of the scroll and the house and the dog and the suit and all the things in my head. And I was thinking something needs to change here. And I remember saying to Mum, I can't do this anymore. And
Had there been a particularly violent time? Or?
There was just, it was getting worse and worse. And I think I was getting older and older and my tolerance for it. And it was heartbreaking to watch, between the 2 of them as well, because they were getting older and it was time. It was just time. And I knew that she was afraid to do it. And I knew that I was going to have to kind of step up to the plate a little bit. And we found a rental accommodation, and I remember ringing the lady that had it, and the two of us were shaking, like we were so afraid. And we made the decision to go. And for Mam, it was a massive decision to make, because she was walking away from everything that had felt secure, even though it was chaotic and traumatic and all of these things. Sometimes better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And she knew it was going to be a big new chapter. And I remember going to see the rental house, and I can still remember her reaction. You know, you could see it, like she was trying to hold it together on the outside, but I could see how afraid she was on the inside. And my dad was on a really bad binge at the time. And we didn't tell him that we were leaving, because it wouldn't have gone down well, is all I can say.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So we moved our clothes out in black bags for the week previous to it. And it was a Friday morning. She asked the neighbour next door to drop us to the new house. And I remember she took teaspoons out of the drawer so she could make a cup of tea, and she took the plant off the kitchen window.
I remember you telling me that the plant came with.
Yeah, one of those spider plants. Every time I see them now, I always think of her. And yeah, we started our new chapter. And listen, the beginning of it was very turbulent. You know, you can imagine Dad's reaction, because we were his world, even though he didn't know how to communicate with us properly. We were his world, and it took them a while. But the dust eventually settled.
Did he accepted it? Did he come looking for you and like threaten you or anything like that?
Oh, there was loads of rubbish. There was barren orders, and there was loads of things that had to happen. But the dust settled.
Okay.
And he came to, I remember he put up all the curtain poles in the house for us, and he put up shelves in the kitchen, and he used to call down for the tea, and I used to collect him every Thursday, and I used to bring him in to do his shopping, and the relationship was the best it had ever been. It was the best it ever was. It was incredible. And I remember talking to him about the Leaving Cert that time, and, you know, where it was all going to go. And like, I remember him telling me, you know, that he had left school as well when he was really young, and he just couldn't believe that I was at the Leaving Cert bit. You know, he was amazed. Yeah. And I remember getting my results for the Leaving Cert, and I had, like that, and you look back, I hadn't a clue what I wanted to do.
I know.
And you know what's gas? I remember asking the career guidance teacher in school, you know, the way you have them conversations. Yeah. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? No pressure.
I know. At 18, it seems so silly, doesn't it?
You don't know what you're having for your dinner that evening. And I remember saying psychology. I remember at that stage, and philosophy, I had a huge interest in it. And with love and respect to her, I remember her face when I said it. And I remember she said to me, and what are you going to do with that?
Oh, God.
And it was obviously her lens on the world, and I'm sending her loads of love. But in that moment, and this is what happens for humans, we don't focus on what the person says, really. We don't focus on who says it sometimes. We don't focus on the event. Where the focus is and where the installation happens in the mind is the meaning we attach. So in that moment, when I looked at that girl, when I had said psychology, and she went, "Whoa," with her face, I remember thinking, she doesn't think you're going to be able to do it, so there's obviously not a hope you can.
Oh, gosh.
And I remember just saying...
And we don't realise that.
No, she's looking at the world through a completely different lens. Maybe she was thinking about, would I be able to get a job, or was there demand for that kind of thing? Or I don't know what was in her head. But the meaning I attached was, you're not going to be able to do that. And it was like, oh my God, Tara, yeah, back in your box. Delete. And I literally deleted it from my mind. And I remember on my CAO form, I put down business.
Okay.
Because I was like, well, I pack shelves and Johns in the summers and Christmas, and I had an interest and I loved it. And I was like, maybe I could do that. Maybe that would be more suited to me. It's mad when you look back.
And it's so not.
Well,
you really,
I know,
is it?
The people bit, maybe.
Yeah.
I looked at human resources and
Yeah.
stuff, but yeah, the business bit, I was like, maybe I could do that. It's so funny. Like when I look back, that version of me was so the noise of the world was so loud. Like I was listening to what everybody else thought I should do, and I thought everybody knew better than me, instead of listening to my intuition and listening to myself. And I remember going home and telling Mum that I wanted to go to college, and she was frying chops on the pan, and I remember she started crying, and it wasn't like, oh my God, I'm so proud of it. I was like, Tara, we do not have the money.
Yeah.
How, like, oh my God. And I said to her, look, Ma'am, you know, I'll work and we'll figure it out and we'll get through it. And I did. I got my points in my leaving cert and I deferred for a year and I worked in Dunn's. And I saved and saved and saved and saved and saved. And I remember going to the manager in Dunn's at the time, and they don't do transfers, like they just didn't do them. And I was like, look, any chance, you know, and I was a great worker. Like I would always get the head down. I had learned that from Mam. And you did what you were told and you were on time and you did all those things. And they transferred me to the Swan Centre in Rathmines. This was a huge thing. So I got a place in NCI in Ranelagh to start my honours degree in business. And I got a little box room type thing in Rathmines, and I started packing on the night shift in the Swan Centre in Dunn's. So I would finish lectures at kind of 5 o'clock and then leg it to the McDonald's and get a Happy Meal. I had all the toys, thrilled with myself. That was my just my little moment of fame there. I had all of the toys, whatever was released. And I used to start work at 6 o'clock and then we'd do the night pack in Dunn's. And I met the coolest people on that, honest to God. And you'd be packing the shop until maybe whatever time you get out, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, and then walk back up in Rathmines into the bed and out back in for lectures at 9 o'clock the next morning.
And were you paying for your own rent then doing that, and then also sending money home to mum?
I had to send a bit of money home because she was trying to keep things going as well. She was in a rental accommodation, and so I sent a bit home and I paid for my own bits up there. And I did that for 2 years. And I remember after the 2 years, I was floored, to be honest with you. Like you get to come home maybe at Easter and Christmas. And I remember coming home the Easter before I was due to finish in second year. And I was as white as a ghost. And Mam was like, Tara, like, I love you, but I don't think we can keep doing this.
Yeah.
And she was right. Like, so I knew I wanted to get that scroll. I hadn't finished my little manifestation. So I took a year out. And I went back, transferred back into Dunn's and Ballina, and I worked as many hours as they'd give me. And I learned to drive. And I bought a car off a farmer. There was hay in the back seats, I remember. The smell. And I went out with a 2-litre bottle of bleach. And anyone I used to give lifts to used to stink of bleach when they came out.
Oh my God.
I know. So you do what you have to do. So got the car, and then I got my place. I transferred from NCI and asked them, could I finish out my degree in Sligo? And I used to drive up and down to Sligo every day. And I finished out my honours degree.
Good woman.
So I got the scroll.
You got it.
Part 1 of the manifestation. Yeah.
Goodness me. That was some determination.
It was, but I think I was motivated away from pain all the time.
Okay.
I was thinking, can't be where I was, need to make something better.
Okay. And do you think that you were always busy because you're always trying to bury this? Like, did that suit your personality type? Because if you stopped, you obviously were very busy in college and busy working. If you stopped to think, were you ever worried you just collapse with the pain?
Yeah. 1,000,000%. And I have to watch that in myself even now, that I don't deflect or distract with work if there's something going on in my life. I have to catch myself, your own awareness of, oh, hello, am I burying myself here? It's like, no, keep going. That was definitely one of my coping mechanisms against trauma, was just focus on something else and bury yourself in it. And from obviously a lot of counselling and psychotherapy, I have learned all these things, but it's definitely something I have to watch, because I can have a tendency, as I'm sure some of your listeners have, to just keep going. Like I push even harder when things get hard, to try to not feel the feeling that I actually need to feel, because I'm too afraid of it.
Okay. I'm too afraid to let it out. And
that it'll hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did bury myself. And I remember finishing the honours degree, and I can still remember the feeling of, seeing the results on the wall. It was a huge thing. Like, it was just huge. I couldn't believe I had done it. And you start to break these patterns in your head of who you believe that you are and the stories that you tell yourself and what you're capable of, one action at a time. And I often say to clients, if you want to rewrite the story that's in your head, you need to start doing things that counteract it. And slowly but surely, that was what I began to do. I began to dismantle this version of me that I thought was going to determine my future in my mind through the actions I was doing in the present. And I remember finishing the degree and making the decision to go to Australia. And I sold my Honda Civic and all the things that you do. And poor old man was heartbroken, you know, because it was the first time I'd left her and she was going to be left in this rental accommodation by herself to a large degree. Because
Did she have many friends?
Oh, she did. She did. Great friends.
Okay.
And you know what she actually went on and did when I went, even though she was so heartbroken of me going, she went back and did a bookkeeping course.
Oh, wow. Brilliant.
And nailed it.
Oh, I'd say so.
Legend.
You didn't get your brains from nowhere.
Well, come here. And that was her dismantling all her stories that she had about herself, that she wasn't intelligent. I was so proud of her. She was amazing.
Isn't that mad? Even you saying that, dismantling the stories that she wasn't intelligent, like I'm the one with goosebumps, because the fact that your mother probably thought for so long that she wasn't worthy.
She did, yeah. Maybe that was part of the reason that she stayed. Yeah. You know, it's always the stories that we tell ourselves. And she was so intelligent. Like I remember looking at her, she showed me all her copies when I came back. And she was like, you know, real neat and everything was fantastic. I was like, oh my God, ma'am, A student.
How long did you go to Australia for?
I was 4 months in Australia. And I remember the week before I ended up coming home, I was actually looking at extending my visa. I loved it. There was a different feeling in the world over there. And, you know, it sounds mad and I wonder if there's anyone listening that can identify. I think we're very tuned in to our environments. And sometimes we have associations to the places that we're in and the people that are around us in those places. And it can determine to a large degree who we think we are based on where we are. And when I went to Australia, I could be anyone I wanted to be. It felt like this new chapter. No one knew anything about me. Nobody knew anything about my past. I could create a new version of myself, which I found so liberating.
Can I ask you one thing about that there? Did the town know about your situation with your dad?
No.
After you left, or they just knew that you were separated?
They knew that. They knew that they had separated.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was there shame around that at that time?
There
because
was
that was
for me, I'd say.
Oh, there was.
Yeah,
okay.
I remember the school bus had to pick me up in a different place, and I remember having to tell the driver and been like, "So from Monday, you'll be picking me," you know.
Okay.
I remember thinking, please don't ask me any questions, please don't ask me any questions. And fair play, like you didn't, you know.
Okay, okay. Because I know of friends whose parents divorced or separated years ago, like 20 odd years ago. There was that awful shame around what will the neighbours think that we're separating. It's a little bit different now.
Thanks be to God.
Yeah.
You know, because life is too short. Yeah.
So 4 months in Australia, why so short?
4 months and the phone rang and it was my brother. And I remember him saying to me, are you sitting down? And I said, no, why? And he said, Dad is dead. My dad was 58 when he died and he had an aneurysm. And he hadn't been sick. There wasn't anything that would have been an indicator that there was something wrong. Mum was working in the Super Value across the road and the neighbour noticed that the house was quiet. And like I said, Dad would always been out whistling and talking to the birds and he'd feed any animal that came within a 5 mile radius. And the neighbour noticed that the house had gone quiet and he went across the road and just said it. And Mum came across and they were knocking and knocking and knocking and she just said she got an awful bad feeling. And they rang the guards and he had died on the floor in the living room.
Okay.
Yeah. It was heartbreaking.
Yeah. To think that he was alone?
That he was alone. Yeah, I'd hate to think that he was afraid.
Okay.
Nobody wants to die by themselves, I don't think. Yeah.
Did they think that it happened quickly though, or?
They think he had a massive heart attack.
Okay.
Yeah. I always feel so sad to think of him that way. You know, he had taken a pillow down from the couch and put it underneath his head.
Okay, so he obviously felt unwell.
He must have felt something. Yeah, it's funny the way those kind of moments will play on your mind, that you wonder. You can build a billion different scenarios. But yeah, I remember having to travel back home and it took, I think it was 36 hours of flying to get from Melbourne back home. And I remember the last conversation that I had with him as well. Like he was coming out the gate of Super Value. It was a really sunny day. And you know the way sometimes the sun shines through the trees and kind of breaks with the leaves, and it was shining on his face. And we were just talking about random stuff like, and he went back through the gate and I was like, oh, see you later. And he went on a binge for a few weeks. And I remember it was getting closer and closer to the time to go. And I went to find him to say goodbye. And I checked the usual places that I thought he might be and I couldn't find him. And like that, I was, whatever age, early 20s, and full of attitude, thinking the world owed me everything. And I remember I gave up and I drove out of the estate, and I never seen him again. The next time that I seen him, he was in McGowan's funeral home in Ballina. So he had died. I definitely regret that. I do.
Not going and not finding him.
Not finding him, yeah. And it's funny, like I can, you be in your car a billion times, like, but I still remember the speed ramps in the estate. I can remember going over the speed ramps. It was like my brain was trying to say to me, this is a moment now, but I didn't pay attention. I was just like, oh, well, he's not here to say goodbye to me, and I'm about to go on my travels, and I'm so important, and I drove out of the estate.
Hindsight's a great thing. And then you can, brilliant. I don't know what to say to that.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. When I look back, it definitely is one of those things. And, I've told this story before. I was always so afraid that he was mad at me. Like, I was so afraid he was mad. And both of us had...
Why were you afraid that he was mad at you?
Because I went and never said bye.
Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't
the other
fear.
side
It
of the
wasn't
world.
like a fear of him again. Okay.
No, it was just sad that I was thinking, oh, Jesus, like I went without saying bye. And we were getting on great. Like, like I said, when he wasn't drinking, he was just class. But both of us have psoriasis. And I used to always say, thanks, Dad.
The one thing you gave me. What a thing to give someone. I
know, it's such a dose. And he used to get that Nizoral shampoo on the medical card.
Okay.
And he used to get it on repeat prescription, so we used to share it.
Oh yeah, of course.
And when I came back from Australia and he had been buried, we had to clear
all the
house.
Nizoral. It's like black sacks full of it.
Come here, hadn't he left on the kitchen window with my name on it?
Oh.
And when I moved back, the dodgy neck curtain, I knew he wasn't mad at me. And I stood in the kitchen with them 4 bottles of shampoo and I sobbed.
Oh my God, I can imagine.
There was a flurry of people around me and I remember them all thinking, nobody's saying crying over there over the Nizoral shampoo. Yeah. But it meant so much. It meant that he wasn't cross, and he kept them, and he had my name written on the bottle on the top. I know. I don't think I ever used them. I think I just kept them and looked at them. But he was such a gorgeous man. He was just held hostage by his own pain.
And do you know where that pain came from?
I don't.
No,
I don't. Sadly.
And do you? Did you have to learn to forgive your father? Like, did you carry ill feelings about him for a long part of your life, or did the forgiveness come naturally, or did you have to go through therapy to get that? Or
I went through a good bit of therapy, yeah, and Mam was brilliant. Okay. Mam, talking to Mam, and even though she didn't have a huge understanding of his past either, and processing it myself, and I always journaled. I used to write in a diary from when I could write, and I'd write on the outside of it, do not read this. I'd say the whole house was like, what? She's mad about this fella now at the moment. But yeah, I used to get my feelings out and it used to really help me to process stuff. And then, so the journaling, Mam, and counselling. And I remember I had gone to see a fortune teller after Dad died. And I'll never forget the woman. She has since passed away, actually. And I went to the funeral home when he was laid out and I wrote him a letter. And in the letter I wrote that I forgave him, and I wrote what I thought was my reasons for understanding everything that had happened. And I put the note into his pocket, in his jacket where he was laid out. And when I went to this fortune teller, she said, one of the first things she said was, oh, there's a male presence on your left-hand side. Father figure, does that make any sense? And I was sitting across the room, afraid of my life. You're afraid to talk then in case you give anything away. I was like,
because you don't want.
No, you're like, take off all your rings, don't blink, give them nothing to. Yeah. And she was deadly though, and she said, he wants you to know that he got your note. And I mean, I'd say the woman was like, what sort of lunatic is across from me? I exploded crying.
Okay.
Because it was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge to know that he had got that note. It meant an awful lot. Yeah, that woman, she was fantastic when I look
These
back.
psychic mediums, there is something to them.
1,000,000%. There's humans that have a gift.
Yeah.
Whether sorry to the people that are listening, they're like, meh. But yeah, I have definitely come across the magical ones in my time.
Yeah.
She has since passed on, that lady. She was lovely.
Oh my God.
I know.
So it's mad how it comes around. So when you come back, there was no chance you'd go back to Australia after that?
No, Mum and my brother, I know, were heartbroken after it. And I knew I needed to be at home.
Okay.
I remember flying that 36 hours, and I tell you realise how far away is as well. You know, I was thinking, Jesus, I need to be at home. And Mum was working for the local Super Value. And they landed over at when Dad's funeral was on with, you know, all the good stuff. The O'Hara's bread and the you know,
shepherd's pies.
Oh my God, and the apple tarts and buns and all the good stuff. And the owner of the store, John Maloney, I always tell the story because I'm so grateful. He said to me, listen, I hear you're just back from Australia. And I said, yeah. And he said, you've no job. And I was like, no. And he said, look, I can give you a few hours on checkouts. And Dad was buried on the Wednesday and I started on checkouts on the Sunday evening. And I was sideways. I remember, like, I was even so afraid with my float. This girl called Rachel Padden, she's class legend from Ballina. She trained me in, and I was petrified. Like, I was just so all over the place. And I probably kept the head down for a while. And I slowly but surely began to kind of come back into myself, I suppose. And between the honours degree and the experience with Dunn's, I remember asking John Maloney, would he give me a chance and take me off the checkouts and just see if I could be of any value elsewhere in the shop. And long story short, I climbed the ladder in Super Value and got to the top. So I was on a management team of 3. We had about 42 staff over several departments within the store. And I bought my first house at 26. I wore a suit to work. I bought a BMW. And my white dog was called Daisy.
Oh,
yes!
So you did it.
I did it. Yeah.
Wow. How long did it take you to get to management level in Super Value?
Not that long.
I wouldn't say so.
No, it was only
sass bag.
Well, I was just
Aren't
a
you?
hard worker. Honest to God.
There's a lot to be said for graft, isn't there?
The graft is the differentiator. Yeah.
Yeah, it's putting that extra, if you can put that extra like 1 to 2% into every part of your day, I think it pays off immeasurably, doesn't it?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. You would have seen that in your journey. Did you have to put in the extra 1 to 2%?
Oh God, yeah. But it's sure, even with studying for the Leaving Cert or studying for exams, you always, you know, it was never good enough to just do the 2 hour study. You had to do the 2.5.
I know. And
that's what made the difference then. That's what I'm a big believer in that, because I don't think that, like me, I'm no more intelligent than the next person, but I just studied my arse off in school to get the points to get into pharmacy. And that's the reality. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, me too. I love listening to interviews about, you know, the top 1%.
Oh yeah.
What makes them different. Graft.
Yeah, no, it is.
They show up on the days they don't want to show up. They do the things that nobody else wants to do.
Hungover as hell.
That was definitely me. Out the Thursday night, the Friday night, shook the world, still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. So
I'll never forget, actually, when I was in first year in college, I worked in Boots in Nutgrove, actually, just as on the makeup. This is before I waitressed all throughout school. Like from 16 I waitressed, but for some reason I got a job in the pharmacy just for the first few months of college, and I'd gone to a Deb's. Was it my Deb's? Was it someone else's Deb's? And I was in work the next day. Sweet
Hanging.
mother of God. I think I came straight from the Deb's to work and changed there. Yes. And like, I never forget at 11 o'clock for lunch or for my break, going into the staff room and literally just conking out of sleep.
Oh God.
And having to be woken up to go back out. But yeah, like that.
But you were working in Boots. Could you have got the Diorolite?
Do you know what? I knew nothing about medicines back then. I was only just in college, so I knew nothing about them.
You?
Well, I suppose it was just everyone else was just working, you know, no one.
God, help you if I was there.
And I wouldn't have admitted it. I wouldn't have told anyone that I would have been out that night, because that would have been, then they would have had something against me. So I'd rather just pretend that I was
sound.
Yeah,
just collapse on the table.
I'm just grand. I'm just feeling a bit sick.
How many people came in seeing you unconscious?
But I've turned up feeling sick, so it's good. It's not hangover, okay? Never admit to a hangover in work.
Oh, Laura.
Yeah.
God, the things we do.
I know, it's mad.
I know.
And so I know part of your story is that you were at a Super Value event and there was a motivational speaker there.
There was.
And you thought...
Amazing.
You thought, amazing, but I think I can do that.
Well, I remember the feeling. So I remember as part of the work, we used to go to an annual conference. It was brilliant. And at the business was going through a transition. And one of the things they did... was they would always have like the managing director would do a big speech, and they played the video clip, which is Al Pacino's speech from Any Given Sunday. And he talks about inches. If anyone is listening and you haven't, just get straight on YouTube now, pause this, watch it, and then come back.
Yes.
You'll thank me. But I remember looking around the room.
That's the extra 1% as well, though, isn't it? That inches.
Yeah. A million. Yeah, it is. Yeah. That speech, he's talking to a load of American football players in their changing room at the halftime thing of a game that they're obviously losing. But the speech will put the hairs up on the back of your neck. And I remember thinking lots of things, right? But I remember thinking, how cool is he that he thought this is what they need to listen to? Like, I would have climbed the side of the building after I watched it. Yeah. The whole place was buzzing. It was electric what happened to the energy. And I was thinking, oh my God, imagine if you got to do that. So that was the first, well, it definitely wasn't the first, but it was a spark in my head of going, oh my God, like what I would give to be up there, right? And then the SuperValu world happened and continued to happen. And along the way, I met my husband. We got engaged. We got married. I was always reading, personal development books. I was fascinated with neuroscience. I was always watching documentaries on the mind. And I never joined the dots in my head, but I was constantly in that world, loving it organically. Like, that was where my mind would go when it wandered. And I would often say that to people, what pages do you follow? What books do you read organically that come from a place of heart's desire and passion? Not
rather than have to.
Have to. Yeah. Need to, must. Where's the want to, love to, enjoy to, can't wait to? And that was the stuff I was doing on the sidelines. So when I met Kevin, got engaged, got married, and then I had my son Kai. Like that question that you asked me about the moving at 1,000 miles an hour, being on maternity leave was the first time I stopped. I felt so uncomfortable in my own skin with the stopping. I can't even tell you. It nearly drove me insane.
You're very like me in an awful lot of ways.
Sure, that's why we get on great.
I don't know how to stop, and it's not great for me, but I know that. But we're not here to talk about me.
Well, we could do that another day. But yeah, I was just, oh my God, it was the weirdest feeling to stop. And I was almost forced to sit with myself and be like, right, Tara, you made this decision at 11 that if you were ever lucky enough to become someone's mother, you were going to have scrolls and houses and all these things. But now you actually are someone's mother. And I remember the transition into motherhood that, I had watched all of the One Born Every Minute. I was like, sorry, where's my episode? Because this is not, oh my God, the reality. I had all the apps, I had all the books. Nothing made sense. I felt like I was having a permanent out-of-body experience.
Throughout the pregnancy?
Once he was born.
Okay. The pregnancy, was it okay?
Sailed. I was sound.
Okay. You thought you were going to give birth and you'd be like, one of these like hippie moms. Everything came so naturally, and then it was like a thunderbolt. Yeah.
Mother of God. Yeah. It was the thunderbolt and then a million thunderbolts on top of it. And my mum at the time, so mum had been diagnosed with COPD, which is a progressive lung disease. A while, probably about 3 or 4 years before Kai was born. And she was in the early stages. So they kind of stage COPD. They have a different way of grading it now, but they say that there was 4 stages and she was in stage 2 when she was diagnosed. And I could see the impacts of it, but they weren't significant. Once Kai was born, it leveled up, that disease. I don't even know what happened. Her level of dependency went from a little bit to a lot. And it felt like it was overnight. And obviously it was just that I was overwhelmed being a new mother. But it just, that whole time, I just remember feeling so disconnected from myself, disconnected from the world. I didn't know whether I was coming or going. Honest to God, I didn't. And that having to stop and be forced to look at what was the rest of it going to look like. I had to take into consideration that I was now somebody's mother. But I also had to take into consideration that my mother was becoming more and more dependent with every passing day. And I knew that the decisions that I was going to make for the next chapter of my life needed to be made with a lot of forward thinking, because I knew that things were going to get much more difficult than they had been.
Okay.
It was huge. That time was huge. And I knew in my heart, even though I loved working in SuperValu and I loved the people, from a balance, whatever that word is, perspective, I couldn't keep going. I couldn't do that life where, retail is very demanding hours wise.
Tell me.
Yeah. And I wanted to be the mother that was there to have the chat in the morning when he was having the Rice Krispies, and be there at the school gate to pick him up, and have at the dinner on the table and the fire on and the telly on, and the things that were my stabilizers in the world. And I knew if I wanted that to happen, I was going to have to make some changes in terms of the circumstances that I was in. So I started to search, and that's the only way I can say it. I was following an absolute feeling, and I always say this to people because, I'm invited to speak in schools sometimes. I didn't know what life coaching was. The navigation coach was nowhere in my mind. I was following a feeling of what I wanted to have every day when I woke up. And I would say that to Leaving Certs, how do you want to feel in your life in 10 years' time? Not what do you want to be doing? How do you want to feel?
Oh my God, that's just such a realization. It's not what do you want to do, like career or
the title.
It's how do I want to feel within?
Yeah. How do I want to feel waking up? Oh, you're having a moment.
Yeah, I am actually. Jesus. It's very rare for me to not have anything to say.
Yeah. But
it's happened to me twice now during this podcast.
I know.
So go on, please continue.
Go on. Sorry now if you're rattled. But that was a huge thing. That how do I want to feel? And I wanted to feel freedom. So I wanted the freedom to be financial in terms of I have enough food in the fridge. When I turn on the light switch, the lights go on, and I can go for a posh cup of coffee on a Tuesday. I just wanted to have enough. I wanted to have the flexibility to be able to be that mother that I just described there.
Did this search begin when you held the baby in your arms for the first time, or did it come over time?
It came over time, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question. It came over time, and it kind of came, you'd be up in the middle of the night feeding, and you're
I've done that a bit. Yeah,
and you think the whole world is asleep, and you're like, oh my God.
I know.
I used to have these epiphanies in the middle of the night. I know. So it happened then. In those times, I was like, right, we're going to need to make some changes. So I wanted to be around people. I knew that there was going to be people because that was always the thing in retail that completely fascinated me. I knew I wanted to make an impact. I wanted there to be a feeling or energy attached to the work that I did that would make a difference in someone's life or in the world. I needed there to be creativity. I was always dreaming things up and sketching things and drawing things. And I was thinking if I could just create something moving forward where I could allow that to breathe because it was part of me. So I had all these criteria for the feelings that I wanted to feel. And that was what I started searching. So I used to think about the feeling, and then I would think what jobs or what role or what thing or what decision would align to the feelings. And I started looking at things like health and safety, food safety, auditing.
Oh God, that's very boring.
I know, but it was like the hours. I was like, okay, so maybe I could work from this time to this time. It would mean I could satisfy the be at home, be the mom piece.
Okay.
But then I was like, okay, I get to work around the people. But then I was like, oh my God, no, I won't get to be creative. I'll just be checking the temperatures of lasagnas. I can't cope. So I was just exploring. I did a health and fitness course online. So I remember dabbling, and I would say to anybody listening, before you commit to the PhD or the master's or the degree, diploma or certificate, do one of those little free kind of courses, or the ones that cost you $10.99, where you get to dip your toe in the water to see if this ignites something within you. Because you're making a more informed decision then when you think about the more long-term commitment, either financially, time-wise, energy-wise, and you're making your decision from a better place. That was what I started to do. So I looked at digital marketing. I was like, the whole world has a website. Maybe I could do that. Then I was like, oh dear Jesus, no, the computers, I'm allergic.
Oh my God,
they hate me very bad. But I did a train the trainer. Went to Dublin, did a train the trainer, and they do the icebreaker thing around the room. And the last man in the chair was a coach. And I remember listening to him talk and thinking, what does your man do? And on the tea break, I went out and I just said to him, come here, can you tell me a little bit more about that? I've never heard of it. And I was absolutely blown away. So I went back to my table after the tea break, started Googling under the table. This was back in 2016, 2017, when life coaching was not a thing in Ireland.
Yeah.
And I was Googling how to become a life coach, And I found the Irish Life Coach Institute where I trained. And I remember talking to Kevin about it and saying, you know, I had always worked so hard for other people. I said, if I can work that hard for other people, I can work that hard for us. But I knew that I was going to have to give up everything that I had and everything that I had worked 19 years to build in order to do it. And I was petrified. Like when I say everything in me was screaming, you know, you're a mother, you're a wife, you're a daughter, you have a mortgage, you have bills, you've worked 19 years to do this, you went and studied a degree in it, and now you're about to throw that all away. I remember my mother ringing my brother asking to ask me, was I having a nervous breakdown? Ring your sister and ask her if she's having a nervous breakdown. And it was because they all thought that I was about to walk away from something I had built an entire life trying to create, where I knew somewhere in the depths of my soul that I was operating in the world at about 60% and that there was 40% of me in a tank somewhere.
And I began to find that tank.
What the hell was I waiting for? What was I keeping it for? Did your husband support
you, or did he question you?
No, he's a legend. Yeah.
You need someone in your corner,
don't you? Like Mickey out of Rocky.
Oh, you do. You need that one, and you only need one. You only need one. Now, some of us are lucky enough to have several, but you only need one.
One person to say,
just bloody well go for it.
I believe you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? I believed I could do it for the first time in my life.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah. And I backed me, you know, and I thought...
Was that thousands of euros worth of therapy, Bear?
Thousands of euro and about 4 million Barry's G-bags.
I'd say. And a few tears.
Oh, stop. Yeah. And soul searching and sitting on empty beaches and, you know, journaling.
I wonder if there's something about the 19, 20 years, because I left community pharmacy after 20 years as well. Stop. So isn't that interesting? Maybe there's something about that 20-year itch maybe
there's
in
no
females.
7, it's 20.
Yeah, I know, it's gas.
I know, and our stories are so similar, it's mad.
So tell me about this. So you met this coach.
Yeah. Asked him all the questions, was blown away, Googled under the table, went back, had the conversations with the people at home, got the trainer, by the way. I was delighted with that.
Of course you did.
And I made the decision to leave SuperValu. Now,
and did you manage to convince your mother and your brother and everyone else that you weren't half stone mad, or
kinda?
Okay.
Yeah, I think they were still like, oh Jesus, the candles. Yeah. But I remember I was due back from, you know, you have the meeting before you come back from maternity leave. I'll never forget it. And I wrote out my notice. And I had the envelope sticking out the top corner of my handbag on the floor in the passenger seat of the car. And the drive from my housing estate into the SuperValu was about 10 minutes. I pulled the car in 3 times to vomit because I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? When I tell you, my whole body was in convulsion. It's insane. The body will try to stop you at all costs if it thinks that you're about to jeopardize everything that it believes is safe.
So funny. And it's like you saying you've learned to read the room, or you from a young age.
Yeah.
Like that physical sense that you get.
Yeah.
Unreal.
The body keeps the score. I know. So went back, sat across from the 2 lads, the owners of the store, and they were telling me about all their plans, and I was feeling sicker by the minute of what we were going to do when I came back. And I was thinking, oh, mother of sweet divine Jesus, how am I going to
drop the bomb immediately?
I was choking on the cup of tea.
Okay.
Not like me. Yeah. And I remember my hand, I can still see my hand going across the table shaking with the envelope. Oh. And I'd say they were thinking, what the hell is this? And I remember John's wife, Fidel, she's gorgeous, and she said to me, we always knew we could never keep you.
Oh.
And
your light was just so bright.
I know. But do you know what? That was like the last that I needed.
Yeah.
I was like, these people see something in me that I don't even bloody see. Maybe I can make this work. Do you know?
Yes.
And I started training with the Irish Life Coach Institute in Dublin. And I always say I went into that room the very first day on a Saturday in the Maldron and Tala, and I felt like I came home. I hung on every word that Adrian Mitchell said. I couldn't get it into, if they could have hooked it to my veins, I can't. It was like putting on the most comfortable pair of slippers that you've ever had in your life. I felt like I came home. Wow. I knew I had found my place. It's a feeling that I will never forget, ever. And I remember thinking, will I be lucky enough to get to do this for the rest of my life? And I trained and trained and trained and trained. Met the most incredible group of people on my course, and I graduated on a Sunday, and I took my first client on Monday, and I never looked back. Yeah.
And when did you start? So how long were you, say, out of work in inverted commas then?
For about probably a year, I'd say. And me and Kevin ate Cocoa noodles and Cocoa Pops, and we
Cocoa noodles are very tasty.
Oh, stunning. All the nutritional.
And they'll fill you up.
Come here, I tell you, I know. And we hockeyed our savings.
Yeah.
Like hockeyed them. But we knew what we were going into.
Okay.
We had sat down and talked about what it was going to take, and, you know, worked out how we'd pay all the bills and where we could pull back, and, you know, all the little bits and pieces. But yeah, it was the beginning of such a cool journey.
Wow. And then, so obviously, how do you get clients then? Is it through Instagram? Is it through?
Most of them, I'd say 98% of them come through word of mouth, which I love.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
It's all, you worked with my mum, you worked with my sister, like it's all things like that. Or, you know, you'll have worked with someone, and someone around them that's close to them will see that they have made big changes in their lives. And they'll ask, you know, what are you doing, or what's different? And I was lucky enough to go on and, you know, further my training. Any course that the Irish Life Coach Institute put on, I did. Because I know something very clearly about myself. I take an awful lot of my confidence from my competence.
Okay.
So I needed to see the pieces of paper to keep the self-belief up, which is, I know, like, I'm very aware that it's the world that tells us that we need the pieces of paper.
I know.
But I would have needed that in the early days until I settled into myself a bit.
And do you think that you also feed off helping people then?
Yeah.
Do you think that gives you some kind of sense of self too, that you can, like, could it be that you're trying to help that little Tara?
That's 1,000,000% what it is. Yeah. 1,000,000%. And the feeling that you get by being able to hold a space for someone that maybe that space was never held for you, that no one understood you, or that you felt like no one understood you. Being able to give that gift to somebody, it's a very humbling feeling to sit in someone's company in that regard.
How young, what's the youngest client that you've taken?
I worked with a girl once that was 16. So you have to get a letter from the parent just to say that they're happy for you to work with their child, and around what capacity it is. And then her mom was parked outside. Okay. So we knew, and her mom came in and looked around the office, and she knew exactly where she was going to be, and she stayed outside for the duration of the session. Okay. Yeah. It was magic. She was gorgeous. Fabulous girlie.
But you see the beauty in everyone, I think.
But everyone is class, like. Yeah. Everyone is class. That thing that, you know, what is it they say, if everyone just witnessed people, not through what they see physically, but just a soul to see another soul. Yeah. Like, we're all incredible.
I know, yeah. Divine creatures. Yeah. Divine creatures.
And we all have a story, and we all have these harsh lessons that the world has taught us, but sometimes we just don't have the awareness or the self-compassion sometimes to just allow ourselves to be.
Or the stillness. Isn't that right?
Yeah, completely, yeah. It's not enough stillness.
Tara, are you comfortable talking about your mum and how she died? Yeah. And the story that led up to that?
Yeah. The COPD, like I said, once Kai came along, it definitely leveled up a lot. Just for anyone that's listening, you know, it's the type of a disease where the patient will have what are called exacerbations in their lungs, where it's like a very bad chest infection or an asthma attack, and their breathing becomes very laboured, and it can result in infection that will need to be treated with steroids or antibiotics. And she would be bedbound then for the period of that. You know, she'd be exhausted because her body was working so hard to breathe. And the exacerbations became more and more frequent toward the end of her life. And she was hospitalised more than she was actually at home. Like the medical teams in Castlebar Hospital, they knew us. Like, we were parts of the furniture. You know, Kai would press the button on the elevator and be in and chatting to the nurses, and he was in his little buggy. Like, I used to feel such guilt for that, you know, you were trying to mind Mam and be Kai's mam as well, and to do what was right for him. But she was in a steady decline. And from what I know now, you know, with all the training, like, the mind has an incredible power over the body. And my brother and I would always have been saying to her, you know, no matter what was happening, you know, it's just a chest infection, Mam. You know, everyone that has that flu, it's going around. You know, you'd be constantly trying to reassure, and not make it feel like it was bigger than it was.
Was that deliberate?
Yeah,
Did you
because
speak about it?
no, it was
Okay.
strange. It was like an unconscious kind of an understanding or knowing that if we had talked about the fact that it was the illness and it was it was becoming more severe, that would have had a negative impact, because that would have impacted her thoughts, which would have impacted her feelings, which would have impacted her actions and behaviours, which would have impacted the way that she showed up in the world. That's how we do life.
Okay.
We do life through thoughts first and foremost. It has a huge impact. And we were always kind of singing off the same hymn sheet, the two of us. It was incredible when I look back, like the way that we handled it. And probably then in the last year, we had home help. There was ladies, amazing people that would come in and help us, in the mornings with her and stuff, because she was so dependent at that stage. And I knew there was going to be a time where, because the medical teams had told us, where palliative care would have to come on board. And Mam had lost some of her brothers and sisters, sadly, to cancer. And we build associations to words in our mind, and we make a decision around what they mean and what they don't mean. And I know for Mam that when palliative care came on board, she had a belief system that meant that you were going to die. Now, I know from meeting palliative care, they're like earth angels. They're the most special, unique, incredible, amazing group of people. They're hand selected to do the work that they do. They're magical.
Aren't they?
Oh my God. Yeah. I have so much respect. Like, I'll never forget how kind they were to us. They were just incredible. And I knew we were nearing that time. And then the GP suggested it. And I remember meeting the team and asking them, when I think back, and I always say this because I still can't believe I did it, but I did. I remember saying to them, nobody brings in anything that says hospice or palliative care. I don't want to see any cards. I don't want to see any clipboards. I don't want to see any biros. I don't want to see any lanyards. Nothing. I said, you call yourselves the pain management team. And if she
I can believe you said that.
I know, yeah, lunatic. And
I'm sure they were like, this small yoke.
Yeah, someone definitely wrote down daughter, psychopath, judge. But they did it. They did it. And she lived for so much longer than anyone thought she was going to live. It was astounding. And, I can still remember the latter part. So she died on the 28th of December in 2018. And I can still remember the week kind of leading up to before she died. She was hell-bent on getting home for Christmas. Mam was all about the Christmas tree and, the bits in the house and whatever. So I remember she was in for respite in the hospital in Ballina, and she rang me and my brother and she was like, I'm outside the door. We were like, I'm sorry, you're outside the what? She wasn't at all. But she was hell-bent on coming home. So she was like, one of you better get here in 5 minutes because I'm coming home. I'm dressed, I have my bags packed and we're going to put up the tree. And I was like, oh, me nerves.
I like her sass. That's where you get it from. Isn't it?
Yeah. She took
like no messing with Mammy.
No messing. So we were sweating anyway. We brought her home and put up the tree and did all the bits. And when I think back, there was some part of her that definitely knew that it was her last Christmas. And myself and my brother used to take turns to stay. And it was my turn to stay on this particular day. It was the 22nd of December. And she wasn't great during the day. I just remember her breathing was very kind of laboured. And I had contacted the GP and I gave the girls from palliative care a shout. And at that stage, I was able to administer the morphine and stuff myself. They were just so understanding and sound, and taught us how to do everything and to be able to obviously give her the best, level of care. And I brought her down to bed at about 3:15 in the day. And I watched the telly and I did a few bits around the house and I was wrecked, I remember. So I went to bed and she called me from the bottom bedroom at about, it was sometime after 11 o'clock. And I remember going down and as soon as I went into the room, I knew. So she was very lethargic. She was very swollen in her face and very little talk, and I something in me knew that things were not good. And I remember saying to her, Ma'am, I think we're going to have to ring someone. And she said, no, because she knew they were going to bring her to the hospital. And I just said, Ma'am, please don't make me do this by myself. And I can remember her saying, okay. And it's funny, these little memories, even every time I tell the story, it's like watching a film in your head. It's so clear. And I remember the ambulance arrived, and it was one of the first times one of the neighbours, she had the most beautiful neighbours, and the neighbours would always come out. We had done this so many times, you have no idea. We knew the ambulance drivers by name, like, you know.
Okay.
And she never talked. I remember they put the oxygen on her and they were bringing her out. And I can remember her on the stretcher coming out the hall. And I remember looking around the room. And I sometimes wonder, did she know that she wouldn't get to see her little housing again? So they put her into the back of the ambulance, and I got into the car, and I remember driving up the road behind her, and I could see they put the lights on, and you could see the flicker of the lights in the night sky. And I knew it was the last time. And don't ask me how I knew, I just knew. And it's funny, whenever I see an ambulance now, I do two things. I bless myself, and I always look into the car behind it. Because that was me. You know, I always look into the car behind it for whoever it is whose life is maybe falling apart. Like, you don't know what's happening for that person. And we got to the hospital, and they made her comfortable. They told us that she was in respiratory failure. My brother is a drummer in a band, and they were playing away down the country. And yeah, I remember he got to me at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. She had been in intensive care, and then they took her out onto a ward. And we stayed, you know, for the couple of days, and she was kind of going up and down and up and down. And we had Christmas Day. My brother actually got engaged, and we got to tell her that, and she was so excited. And on St. Stephen's Day, I left the hospital at about 3 o'clock in the morning on the 26th, and I came home, and I was only home, and I said it to Kevin at 7 o'clock in the morning. I can't describe it, Laura. I just got a feeling, and I said to Kevin, I have to go back. And he said, you don't have to leave it, like. And I said, I have to go back. And I remember driving back, I still have the parking, you know, you get the ticket off the barrier in the hospital, and it said the 26th and the time in the morning. And I knew the minute I walked into the ward. I knew. And I looked at her, I was like, oh God. And the nurses were brilliant, just keeping us fed with information all the time. And she wouldn't let me go, and Mum was hardcore, like, and you know, she'd always be like, will you go on about your business and do your bits and da-da-da, and where's Kai? But this day, she wouldn't even let me go to the bathroom. I remember I was sitting on a stool beside the bed, and the stool moved and made a noise on the floor, and she put out her hand for me not to go. And I remember looking at her hand, and I was thinking, I took a photograph of her holding my hand, because she never did stuff like that.
Okay.
I remember thinking, why does she want to hold my hand? And she said, don't go. And don't go was the last thing she said. She slipped into a coma, and they moved her from the ward into a private room. And all her brothers and sisters came, and they sang songs and said prayers, and, you know, just supported us. Like, they were just there. And she meant so much to all of them. She was so cool, like. And I was wearing a green jumper. I kept the stupid jumper. It was funny, I was clearing out clothes yesterday, and I came across it, and I was like, I can't clear it out, I have to keep it. This is the last thing I was wearing when she was alive. And on the morning of the 28th of December, her breathing had changed a lot at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And I think I had held on to her for so long, and so had my brother. You know, you kind of realise at the end, when you love someone that much, that you're just keeping them for selfish reasons, that you're just so afraid of how will you go on without her, you know. And I can still see her little face on the pillow. I lied up beside her, and I told her how proud of her that I was, and that it probably wasn't nearly as scary as she thought it was going to be, and that there was a load of people there to meet her, I was sure. I told her to make sure she minded us. I said, make sure you mind us. And I said to her, whenever you're ready now, Ma'am, you head off. And she died 20 minutes later. Her little shoulders dropped. And it was a moment in my life I think I'll never, ever forget. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that she was gone.
Yeah.
You know, she was such a big, magical energy in the world, which is why I believe she's not gone far, because I don't think something that magical could go far. But
I'm sure she's living inside you, Tara, isn't she?
She is.
Yeah,
Definitely through the amount of tea I drink.
Goodness me.
Yeah, she was class. She was class. And I know Dad would have been there, you know, definitely waiting for her. Two of them probably killing each other above in heaven. Jesus' head is wrecked. But yeah, she was the most magical person. She really was. And they let us sit with her in the hospital for ages before they brought her to the morgue. And she was cute. Like, she had all the bits lined up. You know, she had told me what she wanted to wear. And I remember her telling me she wanted to be cremated. Oh my God, Laura. One day we were watching some old CBeebies thing and they had like spiders and creepy crawlies. Kai was there and she was like, she didn't even look at me. She said, "You see them creepy crawlies?" I was like, "Yeah. Don't ever put me into a box in the ground where them fellas can get at me." I was like, "Oh, ma'am, what does that mean?" And she said, she didn't even look. She said, "I'm telling you, Tara, I want to be cremated." And I was like, "Ma'am, please, I can't have this conversation. You just remember that I'm telling you that that's what I want."
Okay.
So she had all these tiny little conversations, probably for about a year and a half before she died, that she just dropped in small little nuggets. And you know what I did? And if there's anyone listening, I can't tell you how precious it is. For about the year before she died, I started recording things on my phone. So I recorded her telling me that she loved me. And I recorded her saying my name. So I just used to press record on the phone and leave it face down. I used to ask her stories about when we were small. And I'd record her telling them. I recorded stories in the hospital of her sitting with her brothers and sisters and telling stories about when they were small. And after she died, I had one video clip that I could send to each one of her brothers and sisters with the two of them talking about, and they all used to call her Lol. Lol, do you remember when we were 10 and we hid behind the gravestones and the priest found us and we robbed the orchard, and they had all these stories. And it's her voice.
Oh my goodness.
Telling the stories. If there's anyone listening, record the voice of the people that you love. Record them saying your name. Record them telling you that they love you. Record them, you know, singing songs or saying, like Mum used to always say, "Good night and God bless you, I love you, I'll see you in the morning." And if you were going out the door, she'd always say, "God, you know, mind yourself now, God bless you, and I love you." And I have that. And it's like gold from the second that the person leaves, because...
Do you play that to yourself regularly?
I do. I listen to her, yeah. And I recorded her videos of her.
Like, I'm actually... I don't know if I can... I don't know if I can finish this podcast without sobbing, honestly.
Stop.
But like, oh my goodness.
People are everything.
Yeah, they really are, aren't they?
Nothing.
And the world is people and the people that you love, and that's all that really matters.
Nothing
and we should
else.
all remember this.
Nothing else matters.
Because we seem to all be going, doing things, and then maybe just not being aware of what's actually really important.
Yeah. And sadly, you have to lose them sometimes to realise it, you know.
I think you knew. You didn't have to lose her, did you? You knew
I knew how
amazing.
special she was, yeah. I never knew what it was going to feel like to lose her. And I'm sometimes asked, because both my parents have passed away, it's the strangest feeling. The world feels so big and you suddenly feel so small. Like when Dad died, I always knew she was there, even though I was big, like, you know, I was 25 years of age. But when Mum died, the world feels so big sometimes, and you just feel, oh my God, I'm a grown up and I'm someone's mother and I'm meant to know what I'm doing. And
I don't have her to ask. Did you used to ask your mother for advice on
Yeah, she was brilliant. Yeah.
Because you said she was so wise. So
And sometimes she'd say nothing and sometimes she'd kill you.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes that was what you needed too. But just, I don't know, having that person for me, and I know everyone's relationship with their parent is different. She used to say to me, "I know you like the back of my hand." And she did. Like, I could walk in and be like, "Well, how's things? What's the crack?" And she'd say to me, "What's wrong?"
Okay.
I'd be like, "Oh, God damn it."
I know, which they always know.
Yeah.
Don't
Having someone in the world that is linked to you like that, it's a very sobering feeling when they're gone.
And did the death of your mother have more of an impact than the death of your father?
Yeah.
Is it
Sorry, Dad. No disrespect if you're listening.
Is it hard to decipher why? Because your mother was there when your dad died, or is it just because your mother was your mother? And
Mum
was it.
Mum, yeah. There'll never be the likes of her again.
Yeah.
I knew the world lost somebody so special when she went. Yeah.
Did you get counselling?
Loads of it.
Okay.
Yeah, on the hour, every hour. Okay. Yeah, loads before she died and after she died. And I'm very lucky to have a very, loyal, sound, grounded group of friends around me as well, like that I was able to talk to about it. But yeah, the talk therapy was my saviour because, grief is a funny thing. Mm. And for me, it never came, on the predictable days. It's a very weird thing. Like, it'll hit you when you absolutely least expect it. And you need to have a support system around you that will be there to pick you up when that happens.
And do you think you have grieved enough, or are you still grieving? Would you ever stop grieving? I
don't think you ever stop. Yeah. I remember hearing that grief is love with nowhere to go. And I feel like you learn to live with the pain of the person not being there. But it never goes away. For me, it's kind of like it's like a hollow somewhere around your heart or something. Yeah, you never get over it.
Yeah.
You just kind of learn to live with it.
Because I suppose if your mum was that person, that wise, shining light in your life, no one can really replace that.
No. And I wouldn't want them to.
No.
People shine in different ways, don't they?
Do, yeah.
They all bring different things to your life. But yeah, she was definitely, she was one of the cornerstones of it all. She was class.
She sounds it. I wish I'd met her.
I know, she would have loved you. She would.
She would have called me a bold old thing.
She would, yeah. And all these people that I meet and I'm lucky enough to cross paths with, like I always say that they feel like my people, It's amazing. The universe has been so kind to me. Like she would have loved all of these people that I get to sit and thank God for all the great things that have come my way, that I get to tell the story about her. They're always the right people that I get to tell. It's amazing.
Yeah. But I do think this is very much part of you and the person that you are. You always say, I'm so grateful, or where does that gratitude come from? Because you say it about very many things.
Maybe from not having an awful lot when we were small, or I think experiencing vast amounts of pain, makes you very grateful for the smallest little things. Like, it's the way I was taught to do life. Mum would always say, thank God for the sky now, and thank God for this mug of tea, and thank God for me bed. And, and she'd be always shifting the lens. Mm-hmm. They say that we, see the world through two lenses. One of them is fear and one of them is love. And she would always be shifting the lens where you would be trained or taught to lead with love. And I do with my son now, we talk about the things that we have to be grateful for, and that there's little boys and girls in the world that don't have those things. And it's very grounding. And it's a very simple way to live. I don't know, I feel very connected to myself in that regard.
Yeah, it's a lovely way to live, because it actually makes everything in life, it makes you, feel gratitude, but it makes you aware of all the good things that you have in life as well, doesn't it?
So many of them.
I know. And we often don't stop to think.
Oh, sure, look it. And we overlook, like me and you were sitting here talking now, and our hearts are beating away there, and our lungs are doing their job, and our tears are doing what they're doing, whether we like it or not. Your nose is running.
God, my mascara.
Ruined. But we're miracles.
Yeah.
We are miracles. And if people can stop every day for just 30 seconds to just breathe into your belly and realise the absolute profound splendour that you are, everything else will just, fall aside.
And if you don't believe that about yourself, you need to find someone who will help you see that, be it a coach, a therapist, something like that.
And I think if you can't see it on the outside, start looking in.
Oh, 100%.
Start looking at the fact that your heart is beating there.
Yeah.
And that your blood is coursing through the veins that have been, it's like an architect designed you. Look at the fact that your legs hold you up in the morning. Look at the fact that me and you can sit here and have this chat, and I can have a mouthful of tea and still think about what I'm going to say what I'm going to say, listen to what you're going to say, and my mouth knows what to do with that mouthful of tea. Like, think about what's happening on the inside if you want to begin to appreciate the miracle. It's astounding when you're able to sit back and look at it from that perspective.
Yeah. Like, I mean, again, I'm dumbfounded by your outlook on life, Tara. It's unreal. And that's why I think that's why you were brought into my life, I think. And that's why I've brought you on. You know, you're such a special person. Before I ask you the 2 questions that I ask every guest, yes, I would like you to tell people where they can find you.
Okay.
And how amazing your compass is. Like, it changed my life. I came to you when I was having my wobble, about to give up my job, ready to launch my own business, worried about what this person would think, worried about would it go well. And you gave me such grounding, and you sent me your compass, and I started writing my lists, because prior to that my head was as busy as, and I could I'd forget to do things, etc. And even the fact that there's a space in it that says, your 3 gratitudes for today, and, whether your tank is full or empty. So please, where can people find you?
Navigationcoach.com. Keep it simple, because Tara's afraid of the technology.
Deadly. Yeah. Absolutely. And where did Navigation Coach come from?
I was lost moving through the world. I am always asked that. People that are like marketing specialists, they're like, oh my God, that's genius. And I'm like, no, it was because I was lost.
I hope you've trademarked it.
Absolutely. Because
Okay.
I used to get pictures from all over the world. People would be like, taking pictures of a compass, and they'd say, saw this and thought of you. And I was like, oh my God, like, a compass is a generic symbol. So yeah, I had to trademark it, which is crazy. But yeah, I was always around that internal compass and that navigation system on the inside. And you heard it in my story. I was always tuning back into the feeling and the path and the direction and leading from your heart. And it was always the inner compass for me. That was always where it started and ended.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on Instagram, you're a navigation coach.
Navigation coach. I'm brutal on Instagram. Sometimes come on and have the tea, but don't be expecting now any fantastic content.
They can find links in there.
Yeah.
Sure, you're great. You come up with lovely little quotes and stuff as well.
There, yeah, some of them I love them, yeah.
But it's mainly your website that people can find you.
Mainly the website, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm a bit under the radar, but sure, look, that's not a bad thing
but
sometimes.
Sure, you're doing talks left, right and centre. I don't know where you get your energy from.
I know. Well, I'm on these amazing new supplements from Fabu. Shameless plug. They're unreal.
Oh, thanks.
I'm on them 2 weeks, and I'm not kidding you. You can ask my husband for the testimonial, never mind me. They're incredible. I have tried so many things, and my quality, not my quantity, my quality of my night's sleep is unbelievable. And I was saying to Laura, and we were chatting earlier, usually when Kai would go back to school, the week after he'd go back, I'd be like, all right, brace yourself now. We're going to have some virus out of the school, so I wouldn't be able to work. This year I was on the immune ones, nothing. Not so much as a runny nose.
Well, do you know what? I'm going to say I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I'm grateful that, for you, because that's my little business. Yeah, I'll be on them forever. They're fantastic.
I'm delighted they're working for you. They're working for loads of people. It's
done,
great.
you. So proud of you.
Well, you gave me the kick up the arse that I needed to go and do it and believe in myself. So it's great. And I think that we all need that, because I think that some people, they might look at people that they perceive to be successful or happy and think, oh God, they've got it all going on, but none of us have it going on.
No.
And I think that we all just, as you say, need to look introspectively sometimes at our beating heart and be grateful for that.
And surround yourself with good people. Yeah,
well, without
they say
a doubt.
they become the average of the 5 people you spend your most time and energy with. Surround yourself with the good humans.
And the people that fill your cup and cheerlead you on.
Yeah. And that they're luring for you to do better, and that they're there on the bad days and they're there on the good days. And yeah, your energy is one of the most precious things you have. They're printing money every day of the week. You need to be making sure that you're minding your time and your energy. It's the 2 things that I would be the most cautious around.
Well, that brings me on to my questions to you.
Yes, go on.
What piece of advice would you give to young people today, if you had something to give? And then, what is the meaning of life?
Lord, the deep and meaningfuls.
They're profound.
The young people, oh my God, I would say that it is not a dress rehearsal. We don't get to come back. I think losing mum and dad was 2 of the biggest kicks in the arse I ever got. Tell the people around you that you love them. Back yourself for every ounce of your being. Turn the noise of the world down, because that's all it is noise. And just stay true to who you are in the world. I think if I could go back and say those sentences to younger me at different times, I think they would have made all the difference to her. So yeah, just that piece that it's not a dress rehearsal. You don't get to the end of it and get to say, hang on a second now, I made a total Hames now, can I go back? No, this is it. And I think if you wake up with that thought in your mind every day, it will change the way you do life.
Yes, I like that. Do life and spend time with the people that you love.
It's not a dress rehearsal.
It isn't a dress rehearsal.
No, tell them you love them. Squeeze the bones off them. You know, have the chat, sit down for the extra 5 minutes. Don't be always rushing and running and racing, and get very clear on what your values are. And when you live from that place that life is not a dress rehearsal, you become very clear very fast on the stuff that's actually important. That's my words.
So you're going to bring tears again? Like, I just, like, honestly,
emotional shambles.
Another mess here. So what's the meaning of life then?
Well, come
Miss
here
Navigation
now.
Coach.
I know. That one made me think. So I feel like two things. I feel like when we're asked what is the meaning of life, I feel like it's something that there's nearly then a pressure to search for.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think that life needs to have a meaning. I feel like I encounter people all the time that are turning themselves inside out to try to prove something to the world or to the people around them. And I think that we're human beings, not human doings. And I think if we could all come from a place where the meaning of life was just to be, I think it'd make such a bloody difference. And the second thing I think about the meaning of life is, I think our job while we're here, as opposed to the meaning of it all, is we're just meant to leave it all a little bit better than we found it. Everybody that you encounter on your path, every experience that you have, any piece of work that you do or something you pour your heart into, I think we're meant to just leave it all a little bit better than we found it.
Well, on that note, I think we're going to open up the cup of tea.
Open the wine.
Tara, it has been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure so many people will get such a lift and a tear and a jolt from this conversation. I'm so grateful for having you on, and thank you so much for giving me your time. You're an absolute beautiful person, inside and out.
Well, likewise, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.
And if you made it this far listening, thanks so much. Make sure you buy the Fabu products. Make sure
and the navigation coach.
Keep the show on the road.
Absolutely.
Keep the tea bags in the pot.
Keep the tea bags in the pot and the milk in the fridge. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mind yourself. Be good.
Honey. Bye-bye.